All right, let's talk about a word that you've probably heard buzzing around everywhere, from tech startups to massive corporations, agile. So what is it really? And why did it totally shake up the way we build things? Let's get into it.
I want you to think about a time you were on a project where the plan was locked in so tight that even a tiny change felt like it would bring the whole thing crashing down. Sound familiar? Well, if it does, you've personally felt the exact problem that Agile was born to solve.
You know, to really understand why Agile was such a revolution, we first have to look at what came before it, the old way of doing things. For a long time, the go-to method for managing big projects, especially in software, was a model called waterfall. And the name really says it all. Each phase flows down to the next one, just like a waterfall. You have to finish one step completely before you can even think about starting the next. You gather all the requirements first, then you finalize the entire design, and only then do you start building. It's very linear and very rigid. And this is where the cracks really start to show. With waterfall, change is basically your worst enemy. The customer, you talk to them at the very beginning to get requirements, and then at the very end for the big reveal. And testing happens so late in the game that you might find a huge deal-breaking problem right before launch when it's super expensive to fix. The risk is just sky high. So you can imagine the frustration that was building up, right? Especially in the fast-paced world of software development. People knew there just had to be a better, more flexible, more human way to work. And out of that frustration, a new idea started to take shape. So in 2001, a group of forward-thinking software developers got together and wrote what we now call the Agile Manifesto. It wasn't some stuffy 1,000-page rulebook. Instead, it was a simple statement of values, 4 core principles designed to completely flip the old way of thinking on its head. This first one is so powerful. It's basically saying that the best ideas don't come from a complicated piece of software or a rigid process. They come from people talking to each other, maybe sketching something out on a whiteboard. It puts the creative power of human connection first. Now hold on, this doesn't mean you just throw all your documents in the trash. But it does challenge that old-school idea that a project is going well just because you have a 300-page instruction manual, even if not a single line of code has been written. Agile says the real proof of progress is something that actually works, something you can click, test, and react to. This one totally changes the game in terms of client relationships. Instead of locking down every little detail on a contract and then vanishing for months, Agile invites the customer to be a part of the team. They're like your co-pilot, giving you constant feedback to make sure you're both headed to the right destination. And here it is. This is the knockout punch to the old waterfall model. We live in a world where things change fast. The market shifts, a competitor launches something new. The ability to pivot and adapt is way more valuable than just stubbornly sticking to a plan that's already out of date. Change isn't the enemy, it's just reality. Okay, so the manifesto gives us the why, right? The big picture mindset. But how do you actually do it on a Tuesday morning with your team? Well, that's where frameworks come in. You can think of them as the practical toolkits for putting Agile into action. And there isn't just one way to be Agile. There are different flavors. Scrum is probably the most famous. It's very structured, with a steady rhythm of work cycles called sprints. Then you have Extreme Programming, or XP, which is super focused on technical excellence and writing top-notch code. And there's Kanban, which is all about visualizing your workflow to make things as smooth and efficient as possible. So let's talk about Scrum for a sec. It's easily the most well-known Agile framework. The whole idea is to work in these short, repeatable cycles called sprints, usually about 1 to 4 weeks long. At the end of every sprint, the team's goal is to deliver a small, usable piece of the final product. Next up is Kanban. And I bet you've seen this in action even if you didn't know what it was called. Ever seen a board with columns for to do, in progress, and done? That's Kanban. It's all about making the work visible, limiting how many things you're juggling at once, and just getting a really nice, smooth flow of delivery. And then we have XP. This is a framework for teams that truly believe the fastest way to go is to build quality in from the start. It introduces some really intense but effective engineering practices, like having 2 developers work together on one computer. That's called pair programming, and it's all about catching mistakes early and writing the best code possible. To really get a feel for how these ideas play out in the real world, let's zoom in a bit. We're going to do a deep dive into Scrum, since it's the most popular framework out there. It gives us a really clear blueprint with specific roles, events, and tools. So in Scrum, everyone has a clear job. There are 3 key roles. You've got the product owner, who decides what gets built. They own the vision. You've got the development team, the builders, who figure out
how to actually create it. And then you have the Scrum Master, who is like the team's coach, making sure the process runs smoothly and clearing any roadblocks out of the way.
And the work itself happens in that steady, repeating cycle we talked about, the sprint. It all starts with planning, where the team decides what they can get done. Then, for a few weeks, they build, checking in with each other every day for a quick 15-minute sync. At the end, they show off what they built in a review, and then they talk about how to get even better in a retrospective. Then, the cycle starts all over again.
The work itself is organized into two main lists, or backlogs. The product backlog is the master list of everything you could ever possibly want for the product. It's the grand vision. The sprint backlog, on the other hand, is just the small chunk of work the team has committed to finishing in the current sprint. It's the difference between looking at a map of the entire country versus the turn-by-turn directions for the next block.
Okay, so we've talked about the what and the how, but let's circle back to the most important question. Why? Why go through all this? What are the actual tangible benefits of working this way?
Well, the benefits directly attack all the weaknesses of that old waterfall model. You deliver useful stuff to your customers much faster, and because they're involved the whole time, they're usually way happier with the final product. The quality's better because you're testing constantly, not just at the end, and maybe most importantly, by working in small, manageable chunks, you dramatically lower the risk of a massive project failure. You can adapt.
Of course, it's not some magic bullet that solves every problem instantly. Let's be real for a second. Shifting to an agile way of working is a huge change, and it definitely comes with its own set of challenges that you need to be aware of.
You know, the biggest hurdle usually isn't learning the new process. It's cultural resistance. People are just used to doing things the old way. Teams can also get into trouble by biting off more than they can chew in a sprint, or sometimes they aren't given the freedom to actually make their own decisions. At the end of the day, the challenges are almost always about people, not processes.
And that really brings us to the core of it all. Agile isn't just about daily meetings or putting sticky notes on a board. It's a fundamental shift in how you think about work. A mindset centered on collaboration, flexibility, and always trying to get a little bit better. So the real question to ask isn't just, are we doing Agile, but are we being Agile? Thanks for tuning in.